Alright, so my presentation is on a paper titled Privacy Preserving Deep Learning by Reza Shakri and Vitaly Shmatikov. As for the problem setup, this paper is mainly focused on the fact that collaboratively training large deep learning models becomes difficult when confidentiality concerns prevent datasets from being shared or transferred between participating parties. This is most prevalent in domains related to medicine, where transferring certain data about individuals, like patient records, is often prohibited by law, or it's restricted to basically being used for training models on datasets local to a single institution, making collaboration pretty difficult. So the authors make a note that centralized learning approaches often make no special considerations for data privacy, where these dataset maintainers likely keep these datasets indefinitely and don't make any special reservations for how or what they're used for. So the novel solution proposed by the authors is a protocol for selectively transferring trained model parameters between participants so that each participant's model can learn from each other's data sets without directly training on them. A technique basically known as federated learning. As for the literature review and related work, the authors cited inspiration from work centered on parallelizing the SGD process through methods of distributed computing on CPU or GPU clusters for neural net training. These approaches weren't necessarily concerned with protecting dataset privacy, so they noted work which attempted to integrate SMC into the training process, citing basically the non-trivial overhead as prohibitive to the application to training large deep neural networks, or deep learning networks in general. They also cite training on encrypted data sets and incorporating differential privacy mechanisms in the traditional machine learning approaches like PCA, SVMs, and various regression methods. And I guess nothing that they had come across in, I think, 2015 had noted any privacy mechanisms basically specifically targeted at deep learning mechanisms. So on to the technical details. The proposed protocol, the authors decided to name distributed selective stochastic gradient descent. So the basic idea is a group of participants decide on a base model architecture, and then each participant uses a local training data set to train on and compute local parameters and gradients, which they then share to a global parameter server that other participants can then selectively download and update their models with global gradients, basically. So each participant maintains their own local data set, parameters, and gradients. At every epoch, each party contributes a selected amount of parameter gradients to a global parameter server. Participants can then retrieve and download these relevant global parameter updates to update their local models. And privacy is maintained through the fact that their data sets and learned models remain local and private to each participant. The authors also make a note that this DSSGD protocol can act as a regularization technique to help avoid overfitting by updating only selected parameters during the learning process. This is tunable, obviously, as each participant gets to select how many and also which parameters to fetch. SGD obviously benefits from the stochastic or random nature of randomized parameter updates, helping the local model to basically avoid local minima or jump out of local minima. Differential privacy mechanisms are also applied to any and all uploaded gradients to help strengthen the privacy. And basically this is done through incorporating a small amount of noise into all the uploaded parameter gradients. And this depends on the participant's privacy budget and the sensitivity of each parameter to said noise. And privacy is also improved by only sharing gradients for certain parameters that are above a configured threshold. As for the performance in the DSSGD protocol, here we see plots over various gradient selection methods on the MNIST and SVHN datasets. These plots compare the rate, or basically the fraction of parameters selected to share with other participants against the trained model accuracies. So here in the left column we select the gradients with the largest values, and we're comparing basically regular SGD against basically shared or pooled datasets against running the protocol with 150, 90, and 30 participants. And as we can see, as we increase the number of parameters we share with the other participants, the accuracy steadily increases until it converges on the regular SGD training method. In the right column, we randomly select the gradients that are thresholded with the gamma and tau parameters, and here we see a very similar performance graph. So as for how this protocol ensures privacy, there's basically two channels for leakage. The authors define direct leakage in two subcategories. So in the training phase, basically there's no direct leakage, as the participants do not reveal any of their local data sets to other participants, so there's no privacy concerns there. And in terms of using the trained model, direct leakage really isn't a factor, as each participant's model is local. So when the model is in use, no model inputs or outputs are seen by other participants or third parties. As for indirect leakage, this would occur through side channels during the training process of DSSGD. So theoretically, some information relating to the participant's local dataset could technically almost be reverse engineered via the public parameter updates. This is mitigated obviously by the fact that each participant remains in control over which updates they want to share. So if you have particularly sensitive parameters, or parameters which would reveal a lot of information about the dataset somehow, you can opt to not share those with other participants. And even contributing a small fraction of the total parameters for a given participant can improve the learning process, which allows for sharing very little about your data set. But the authors do come up with a differential privacy mechanism to combat this indirect leakage. As for the differential privacy mechanism, the authors were focused on two potential sources of indirect leakage. First is how the gradients are selected for sharing, and the second is the actual values of the selected gradients. So in the selection phase, they devise a sparse vector technique to randomly select a small subset of gradients whose values are above a certain threshold. So this functions to effectively clip or bound the amount of information that can be shared about a participant's model, and by extension their data set. So as for the shared values, shared gradients are basically perturbed with additive Laplacian noise generated under a differentially private mechanism. So this serves to basically consistently obscure the true value of any shared parameters, basically making any information that you could reverse engineer about a participant's data sets subject to this noise. And they also implement what they call a privacy budget. So basically each participant is allocated a budget for retrieving parameter updates at every epoch, and this budget basically controls how many gradients they can select for download, and this helps to control the amount of information a particular participant is able to basically garner from other participants' models or data sets. As for the performance of the DSSGD protocol as it relates to the privacy budget, the authors provide a couple plots that compare the accuracy against basically the amount of gradients each participant is able to download at every epoch. And again, this was done on a CNN over the MNIST and SVHM datasets. And as expected, as the privacy budget increases, so does basically the accuracy. And we're comparing basically SGD and the standalone training methods from previous graphs against upload rates of basically every gradient, a tenth, a hundredth, and a thousandth of each participant's parameter gradients. And as the privacy budget per parameter increases, we see performance basically converge to the optimal SGD. So to conclude, just as a brief summary, the DSSGD protocol provides a more efficient privacy-sensitive mechanism for collaboratively training deep learning models, as opposed to, implementing secure multi-party computation in the training process or encrypting or training on encrypted data. It allows participants to control their own learning objective, how much they want to reveal about their local model and data sets, and lets them control basically how to apply jointly learned models on their own inputs and basically their own local model. And it is network and model